So you think you need like $50,000 to buy a house? Yeah, well, let's just stop that right now. No, you don't. You don't need that much money to buy a house. In fact, it would surprise you how little amount of money you think you might actually need to buy a house. So let's start with the comments. How much money do you think minimum you would need? Keep in mind, you've got down payment, closing costs. I don't like to call them hidden costs, but some upfront costs that not everybody likes to talk about. Let's break it down. Let's figure out exactly how much money it takes to buy a house. Let's talk about down payment. What is the minimum down payment for first-time home buyers? 3% is the minimum down for first-time home buyers with a conventional loan. FHA will let you do 3.5%. Very minimum down. If you are a veteran, 0 down. If you are looking to buy in a rural location and utilizing the USDA loan, 0 down. So just know there are low down and 0 down options out there. What about closing costs? So closing costs are going to be the combination of, lender fees, title fees, prepaids, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot that goes into closing costs. And you know what? Let's take it a step further. Let's talk about the down payment just so we can talk in real numbers. We'll just use $350,000. We're going to use $350,000 sales price at 3.5% down. That would be $12,250. So we need $12,250 to buy a $350,000 house with minimum down on an FHA loan. We also need $10,000 in closing costs. So now that's up to $22,250. Also, what are the costs? So here are the hidden upfront costs that I want you to prepare for. Number one is usually the home inspection. This is an optional cost. It is not required by the lender, but in most cases, you're going to want to get a property inspection. That's what tells you everything about the house before you dive fully into it, before you're committing to buying it. You want to get that inspection. They normally run between $200 and $500 depending on your inspector. That would be an upfront cost that you would need to cover out of pocket. The other one is the earnest money deposit. So once you make an offer on a house, pay you $350,000 for this house, seller's like, cool, yeah, we'll take $350,000. You got to put an earnest money deposit down. So that is money that you have to place with the title company, and they're going to hold that money until the day of closing. So let's say you need a total of $20,000 total between your down payment and closing costs at closing. But you did a $5,000 earnest money deposit up front. Well, then you would only need to bring $15,000 to the table because we deduct that earnest money deposit from the final amount of money you need to bring to the closing table. With me so far? Okay. Another hidden cost, the appraisal. The appraisal is what tells us the value. In most cases, we need an appraisal, not always, but if you do need an appraisal, that's what tells the lender how much the house is worth. Those typically run between $500 and $1,000. I've seen them go up as high as $1,000. $750 is kind of like the sweet spot depending on the area. So we're like what? $750 plus $200. We're over $13,000 in total cost is what I have figured out so far to buy this $350,000 house with minimum down. But did you know we can make it even lower? We can drop that number. We could drop that number to 0 if you wanted to. What? How do we do that? Well, here's how we do it. So with that 3.5% down payment, instead of you coming up with the money for that, that's where we get a down payment assistance product. They're going to cover that 3.5% down for you. Normally, it is in the form of a grant or maybe a forgivable second lien or maybe a non-forgivable second lien. There's many different forms of down payment assistance, and depending on your situation, there might be a good one for you if you are low on funds right now. So be sure to keep that one in mind. So all right, but let's keep going. Closing costs. How do we get around those? This is why timing of when you buy is important. So right now, the housing market is kind of slowed down a touch because less people are buying houses because of interest rates. What this has allowed is for sellers to be more willing to negotiate paying for closing costs because they know there's less people interested in buying their house. So this is a great opportunity for any first-time home buyer with little to no money saved up. So instead of going in at, let's say they're asking $350,000 for their house, you're going to say, you know what, I'll give you the full $350,000, but I want you to pay all my closing costs. They're going to be like 10 grand. You know what? I want you to kick in a little extra. I want you to pay $15,000 worth of my closing costs. And sellers are saying yes to that right now. And if there's naysayers out there, you have a shitty realtor. Don't know what else to tell you.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber.
99% of my deals have sellers paying for closing costs unless we don't need them to pay for closing costs. Now I got to prove it to you, right? Let's prove it, guys. All right, so here's a couple closing disclosures that I have helped clients with just recently. So I just want to kind of share with you how this all works so that you can see what I'm looking at. All right, so let's look at this first one. We got this closing disclosure. This was a purchase that I did for a client. As you can see, the loan amount was $256,410. And then I want you to pay close attention to all the way at the bottom where it says says cash to close. This is money that the client had to bring to the closing table. They had to write a check for this dollar amount, $1,246.71. You'll also notice that the house appraised at $350,000. This one was kind of a unique one. The house ended up coming in almost $100,000 over what they were buying it for. So this is a perfect example. This is one of my clients that did exactly what I just said. We used down payment assistance to cover that, and then we had the seller cover closing costs. Now here's the crazy thing I want you to look at. Remember when I said closing costs are right around 10 grand? These closing costs were just over $19,000. We did that on purpose because we had so much seller credits, we didn't have enough fees to offset it. So we increased them to buy the interest rate down for 2 years. So that was kind of a cool one. This one was a sales price of $289,000, loan amount $291,919. The closing costs were just over $17,000, but their cash to close, this is weird, is negative $806.45, which means they got a check to buy their house when they closed on their closing day. The day they got their keys, they got a check for $806.45 to buy a $289,000 house. How the hell does that work? Here's how it works. Remember when I told you about that earnest money deposit? These guys put $1,000 earnest money deposit up front. But because of all the seller credits and down payment assistance and everything else that we had pre-negotiated and taken care of, they got all except for, it'd just be under $200 back. So they spent a little less than $200 to buy a almost $300,000 house. I'm telling you it's real, guys. This is what I do. Let's look at one more. This one is for almost a $200,000 house. I mentioned that on average, my clients spend about $3,000 or less. So this one is a touch higher out of pocket, so bear with me. This guy bought a $199,900. Why do they price it out like that? Just call it $200, 200 grand, whatever. These closing costs were a little closer to what we talked about, just a touch under $12,000. Total cash to close, whopping $2,265 even is what this client had to bring to the closing table. Well under $3,000, even including the cost of their appraisal and home inspection, what they paid up front. This is a perfect example of a client buying a $200,000 house and spending less than $3,000 total out of pocket. And guys, these are just 3 examples. This is stuff that I'm doing every single day. I don't know what your situation is, but I promise you it's probably not worse than you think it is. Every single day I love it when I have conversations with clients. They say, I don't think I'll get qualified, my credit's not good enough, I don't have any money. And then I show them this, we present it, and we find a way to make it happen, and then we get those people into a house. So stop procrastinating. It's 2025, New Year's resolutions. If buying a home is on your list for this year, let's get started today. Give me a call, hit up my website. It's right here within the description of this video. You can schedule a quick 10 to 15 minute phone call with me. I'll answer any questions you might have, get the application started, and we'll get you into a house. You got this.